I have one really great question here that I want to propose to both of you. But first, I would just like Dr. Stanton, if you could speak to, just very briefly, to what Mr. Gindi had to say about this nation state idea, and how, as an expert on genocide, you know that genocide isn't just about killing people, but it's about eradicating their culture, their language, and everything. And Mr. Gindi has told us a lot about that. If you could just respond to that.
Thank you for asking that question. Yeah, let's put the whole concept of genocide out here before us, because that's what's happening to the Copts in Egypt. Genocide is not an event. It is not something, that happens all of a sudden. It builds up. In fact, one kind of genocide, the genocide scholars recognize, is what we call genocide by attrition. It's slow genocide. And that is, in fact, what Copts are subject to now and have been for centuries. There are 10 million Coptic Christians in Egypt. How many people even know that? That's a tenth of the Egyptian population. And yet, Copts are systematically discriminated against in Egypt to this day. As I said in my talk, it began right from the beginning, and it's still going on today. Now, genocide is a process. And what we've seen here with Mr. Gindi, and he's the expert really on the history of the Coptic people in Egypt, is this very gradual and yet systematic process of genocide against Copts. In Genocide Watch, we use a model. It was on. Oh, dear, okay, now you can hear me. My gosh, in fact. I ought to have one of these all the time. Yeah, maybe I can get through to my grandson. Good, sorry. Genocide is a process. It's not an event. It's not something that happens all of a sudden. The genocide against the Jews in the Holocaust, for instance, was led up to by centuries of genocide against Jews. So what we have here, though, is a very slow genocide in Egypt that's from time to time killed thousands at a time, but at other times have just been a gradual process. And what we've got right now is the gradual process. At Genocide Watch, we use a 10-stage model. We say genocide happens in 10 stages. That doesn't mean it's a linear, this is what happens first, then second, third. But these stages are helpful for us to understand the process. And as I say, they usually do happen simultaneously, but nevertheless, it's useful to understand the differences because these themselves are processes. So watch out for them. The first process is classification, where you try to classify a whole group of people as outside the full rights of the people in a society. And that is what, of course, happened to the Jews. The first thing they did is take away their citizenship in Germany and elsewhere that the Germans ruled, and they barred them from being professors in universities, from having government positions. They basically excluded the Jews and literally took away their citizenship. Well, that kind of second-class citizenship also, and that wasn't even second class, that was, you didn't have any citizenship. But in Egypt today, we have second-class citizenship. That is why you see so few Copts in most of the professions that run the country. You see so few Copts. You don't see any Coptic soccer players. What? That's crazy. Why is that? You don't see a lot of these places of honor in the society that Copts can attain to. So classification is the first step. Secondly is symbolization, in which you symbolize the people that you're discriminating against by their name. You name them, Copt, Christian, so forth. But you may even impose symbols on them. That is, you may make people wear certain kinds of clothing. Now, let me just briefly, that is part of the Pact of Umar. It's right in the Pact of Umar that Copts have to wear certain kind of clothing. And if I can find my glasses, which I guess I can, let me just read you a couple of things that Copts had to do with their clothing. Copts were prohibited from riding animals in the Muslim custom. There had to be a kind of belt that was worn for Copts. This is early now, around the waist. Christians had to wear blue belts. Jews had to wear yellow belts. Zoroastrians wore black belts or turbans. Samaritans wore red belts. That is symbolization.
Okay.
That's how you know who's the enemy.
Dr. Stanton, thank you. We can't go on to talk about all of the different.
Believe me, I'm not going to try about all of them.
Because we have.
But the point I'm making is, genocide's a process. The next things in it, and I won't go into detail about them, but are discrimination, and boy, do you have that in Egypt. And the fourth stage is dehumanization, in which you literally start calling the other group the names of animals or insects or diseases and so forth. The fifth step is organization, in which you actually organize groups to terrorize the group that you want to persecute. The sixth stage is polarization, where you try to polarize the society. The next is the stage of preparation, where you actually plan the genocide. Well, that's been going on for a long time. You then have persecution. Persecution is the seventh stage of genocide. The eighth stage is persecution, and Copts are already being persecuted. The stage in which you can actually call it genocide legally is the stage of extermination. And that stage, of course, is where the lawyers say, oh, gosh, we've got a genocide. And then you can start using the word. Well, Genocide Watch doesn't wait for that. We start calling it genocide as soon as we see these signs beginning. The final stage of every genocide is denial. The people who have committed the genocide deny that they did it. And that is where we are also today. It begins at the beginning and goes through long after the genocide is over. That's why the Turks are still denying the genocide against the Armenians, for instance. Sorry, I went on too long.
Thank you. No, that's very important to know those things. And that fits right in with what the president today, Caroline, was talking about on the denial and the cover-up in Egypt today.